Hi, I'm Steven, the Calculator Guy, founder of DeFi Dojo Discord, and this is gonna be about Cosmoverse Day 1. So, last year I did the same sort of thing. I was in Medellin talking about Cosmoverse. That was a little bit different, though, because I was not super familiar with the Cosmos ecosystem. I had done some farming, I had done some trading, I had done some osmosis, I had done some Terra, but I really didn't do that much or know that much about the ecosystem, the people in it, and the politics of it, nor the tech. Really, I don't even think I could tell you what IBC stood for at that point in time. But this year, things are quite a bit different, right? I've co-founded Define Logic Labs, who works both with Sommelier and Quazar, and I've probably utilized almost every single major protocol in the IBC. I've done quite a bit of videos and content on IBC stuff, and I'm really actually genuinely fascinated with a few of the upcoming protocols and the protocols that are out or have recently launched as of today. So let me tell you what I think are sort of the most interesting things that I learned today. Some of the stuff is old news. It's been known by many people for many days or many weeks, and some of this stuff hopefully is kind of new to a lot of you. So let's just dive right in. And I will say that this is not going to be an overly technical, at least from like an IBC infrastructure standpoint. This is going to be more about yields, which is my forte. And I like to speak about things that I understand well rather than things I don't understand that good, which again tends to be things like infrastructure and like quote unquote the tech. So let's get into it. First things first, Quasar and Sommelier become friends, I say. What do I mean? Well, it looks like Quasar is going to launch a vault that is going to optimize the concentrated liquidity of the real yield ETH pair on osmosis. What does that mean? What am I talking about? Well, real yield ETH, if you guys follow me, you know what this is. This is a vault on Sommelier being an L1 blockchain, but having these vaults on Ethereum mainnet, Real Yield ETH has something like $30 million of TVL in it, which is quite kind of ridiculous. This vault has annualized something like 8%. When you deposit into the vault, you get a receipt token. That receipt token is called Yield ETH. That token, right, which is like an LST, it increases in value relative to ETH over time at the yield rate of whatever real yield ETH is getting. That token is now found on osmosis, which means that you can buy the asset, which is great if it's under peg, right? It's an arbitrage opportunity, but also that you can enter real yield ETH without having to pay Ethereum gas fees, which are crazy, right? Oftentimes it'll cost $50 to enter that vault, which is fine for whales, but painful for smaller investors. So the cool thing is Quasar is which used to be seen as maybe a competitor to Sommelier. Instead of being competitive, they seem to be cooperative, which is fantastic and phenomenal, especially for me as someone who likes both teams quite a bit. So you will see optimized concentrated liquidity position between real ETH, the asset, and ETH, the position. So it should be like delta 1 exposure to ETH, and it should be an ETH yield. Hopefully we'll see some incentives in there. And if you have a really well concentrated vault, it should get disproportionate amounts of those incentives while helping the peg stay super healthy for the real yield ETH asset. So I am excited about that. I think that's really cool. And of course, we should see some other things coming out of the Quasar camp in the near future. Let's talk about the other protocol that I mentioned a lot, but I think there are some interesting things about. It's Levana. So Levana is now on Injective, and not only is it on Injective, but if you wanted to short INJ right now, you could get paid like 400% in funding, which is obscene, absurd, and also ridiculous. But there is very, very low interest. So that's one thing to know, to consider, and to understand, is that if you are aping into this position with like a $10,000 INJ short, then you're probably going to flip the open interest and you'll be paying rather than actually receiving. This is much better for smaller minnows, toads, frogs, whatever the small aquatic animals are that represent smaller investors. You don't want to go in there with like 6-7 figure investments and expect to be getting this 400% yield. Now, right now INJ is like up only and has been for quite a long time. I mean, INJ is one of the strange sort of anomalous assets that performs really well relative to the general market. So you might not want to short it. You might not say, well, if I short INJ, I get 400% APR, but if INJ doubles, it doesn't really matter because I'm losing so much money on my short position. Great point. Let's talk about cash and carry. So, cash and carry, and Jonathan from Levana, who actually got to speak to today and speak with today during a I don't even know what you'd call it, some sort of like, I don't know. It was videotaped. It'll be up somewhere. I'm sure I'll post about it. Really cool guy. Anyways, he'll tell you that cash and carry is an interesting way to benefit from the negative funding rates on shorts without actually having short exposure to an asset. So what that looks like is longing and shorting the same amount of the same asset. So you are long 500 injective, you want to be short 500 injective. And if you're long and short, it doesn't really matter what way the markets move because it balances out in the end, which means you're effectively getting a yield on like fiat, on the dollar, because you're not long or short exposed to any asset really, because your long and short exposure are exactly equal. So let's just say you put $1,000 in your long, $1,000 in your short, you're getting 400% APR on your short. Well, that equals 200% APR on your strategy, which is kind of cool. Now, don't expect that to stay. I mean, this is really low open interest, which means the funding rates can flip dramatically and wildly in short periods of time, and you should understand that. Aside from that, there are still interesting opportunities on Levana. I've covered them quite a bit in the past. The Bitcoin Vault, Bitcoin Counterparty Vault, for example, is up 13% since inception. That's insane ROI for Bitcoin. I don't expect that to continue linearly because that would require really, really bad traders on the platform and also low liquidity for the Counterparty Vault, so they get a disproportionate share of that yield. So don't expect that to happen. The Bitcoin Vault has accumulated quite a bit more TVL in a short time frame. So this is good because the Counterparty Vault should suffer less when there are major wins, but it's bad because the Counterparty Vault will benefit less when there are major losses. So, you know, it's better for stable yields, but worse for like that really volatile, crazy earning that you might have seen earlier on in Levana. So there's that. Also, let's talk about Neutron. Jimmy Neutron, not Jimmy Neutron, but Neutron the chain. So Neutron is bringing, Neutron, if you guys don't know, is very overlapped with Lido. So they're bringing Lido ETH on chain onto IBC. And this is going to be great because now people can do whatever they want with wrap staked ETH on IBC. If they want to leverage it, if they want to trade it, if they want to LP it, they can. They'll have a place or home in the IBC to do that. Maybe we'll see some Lido incentives. Who knows? Maybe there'll be Neutron incentives. So right now you can get like a 13% yield on Astroport. I believe Astroport is like a hub on top of Neutron. 13% base, so then you add 2% intrinsic yield from like half of it being wrap staked ETH, you get 15% on your ETH. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good ETH yield. I think there's like $600,000 or maybe $67,000 of TVL in that LP on Astroport. So go check that out if you're interested in ETH yields and you're not like a gigantic whale who wants to deposit $5 million. That could be good for you. Then also, like, hopefully we'll see some more pressure to get wrap stake ETH as like a collateral on Umi or Mars or somewhere, so that you can maybe leverage it like you would on Aave. But if you want to see that succeed, we're gonna have to see higher LTVs, and I know that Cosmos is kind of notorious for low LTVs, right? Very risk-off LTVs. Great for the protocols, I guess, but bad for strategists who want higher levels of leverage. So you're usually reliant on, like, you know, protocols, perpetual protocols, to gain the leverage you like on assets, rather than being able to loop things up dramatically like you might on, again, Aave. Speaking of perpetual protocols, DYDX, of course, is coming to IBC, so this should be interesting. They're going to have validators, they're going to be an IBC chain. In terms of strategies, I'm not sure this really adds anything except for the fact that you can continue to use DYDX as a place to short things, generally with pretty favorable funding rates on DeFi assets. So there is that. Noble has come out with a native form of USDC. So they've worked with Circle to bring USDC to IBC. So there's no bridge wrapped exposure to your USDC. That's fantastic. And we do expect to see some very incentivized pools on Osmosis that will also be concentrated liquidity. So of course, Quazar will have concentrated liquidity forms of those pools, which should get disproportionate returns for users relative to just, of course, doing full range or broad range or even kind of narrow range liquidity. So that should be exciting. The migration We're not really sure when it's going to happen, but I anticipate it will happen in the next week or 2 weeks. What else? I didn't see Umi here, kind of a bummer. I also didn't see Quicksilver, but there's another strategy for you. So Quicksilver, which is a protocol that I really like, because they do most things right, which is they allow stakers to signal intent on whom they want to delegate to, so that the staker with Quicksilver sort of does get to participate in governance in an interesting and fascinating way, and does get to support the validators they like in an interesting way, while also receiving a liquid stake token they can go out and do whatever they want with in IBC. The bad part for most people, but maybe a good part for strategists, is that Q assets are not redeemable at the moment, which means that after LSM was launched, Q Atom plummeted. It's like something like 12% under peg right now, 12 to 13% under peg. Now that hurts if you were holding Q Atom, but it's fantastic if you weren't and you want to make a long bet on Q Atom eventually being redeemable, and it should eventually be redeemable. Under what time frame, we don't really know. We know that Quicksilver has been slow to launch on some things before. They might be slow to launch on this, and if there's any insider information, clearly that would be incredibly profitable. So I oftentimes wonder in these arbitrage opportunities, like how much pressure there is for them to talk to people behind the scenes. I'm not accusing them of that at all, but I always wonder about this, like, because we see this all the time with depeg events, and there's specific pieces of news or information that could cause repegs, and it just makes me curious. It's such a good trade if you know. If you don't know, then you're effectively taking a long bet that Q Atom will be redeemable in the near future. How near? I don't know. Let's assume that I think that Q Atom will get close to parity, like it'll get close to where its peg should be in 3 months. If it is, let's just say 10% depeg now and gets to parity in 3 months, that's an implied APR of 40%. You add that to the intrinsic yield of 20% of staked Atom, that's an implied APR of 60, or a total APR of 60% if it's redeemable, or if it reaches parity, or if it goes up 10% in that 3 months time frame. So I think there's a reasonable assumption that some piece of news or announcement will be made in the next 3 months that will push Q Atom closer to parity. So I wouldn't mind taking that long position or long bet, but I don't know. I have no actual information, certainly not insider information, on the redemption process of Q Atom or the redemption timeline of Q Atom. Now, if you really wanted to make a bet on this and didn't mind being a bit degen, you could also leverage this depeg play on Umi by buying Q Atom with your Atom, collateralizing that on Umi, borrowing Atom, buying Q Atom, collateralizing, borrowing, converting, doing that. You could probably get her up to around 2.2x leverage. Actually, I know you can because of the math, but you might not want to do that in case Q Atom goes even lower. Then you might get liquidated. So instead, probably give yourself a bit of a buffer. Maybe 2x leverage is perfectly fine, right? If it's 60% APR over 3 months and your 2x leverage, that's 120%, and you're only paying 10% to borrow, like 1x your principal. So it's a pretty phenomenal strategy yield with certain assumptions, like three months to some sort of parity there. Anywho, I got a bunch of things to do because having a 20-hour commute and then going to a conference all day, I did fall a little bit behind on all the stuff that I got to do with my businesses. So I'm gonna hop off and start getting to work. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your Cosmoverse.